There are moments in life when everything changes. Not gradually, not with warning, but in a single devastating instant, like lightning splitting the sky. For Sienna Vale, that moment came on a Thursday evening in late October, when the rain fell so hard against the windows of Morrison and Hayes architecture that it sounded like the world itself was weeping. She sat in the conference room on the 42nd floor, her hands folded carefully in her lap, trying to hide the trembling. Before her, spread across the polished mahogany table like broken dreams, lay 12 months of her life, blueprints, renderings, scale models, every sleepless night, every missed dinner, every sacrifice she'd made for the Riverside Commercial Complex project. The project that was supposed to change everything. The project that was supposed to prove that a young woman architect could compete in a world built by men for men. But Gregory Morrison, her boss, wouldn't even look at her work. His eyes, those tired, defeated eyes, stayed fixed on the rain-streaked windows. His fingers drummed nervously against the table, a rhythm that matched the erratic beating of Sienna's heart. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Gregory, Sienna's voice cut through the sound of the storm. The client presentation is in 10 minutes. Shouldn't we review the final? There won't be a presentation, Sienna. 5 words, just 5 simple words, but they landed like physical blows. Sienna felt the air leave her lungs. What? What do you mean? Gregory finally turned to face her, and what she saw in his expression made her stomach drop. It wasn't just disappointment. It wasn't frustration or even anger. It was something far worse. It was fear. The deal is off, he said, his voice hollow. The client has chosen to go in a different direction. Your design has been rejected. The word hung in the air like poison, rejected. Sienna's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. But they loved the preliminary designs, the structural innovation, the sustainability features, the way I integrated the building with the riverside landscape. They said it was exactly what they wanted. What changed? Everything changed, Gregory whispered, finally meeting her eyes. Because he got involved. He? Who's he? Gregory stood abruptly, walking to the windows, his silhouette dark against the storm beyond. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible over the rain. Castellan Roth. Even people who knew nothing about architecture, nothing about real estate, nothing about business, they knew that name. It was whispered in boardrooms and shouted in bankruptcy courts. It appeared in headlines and haunted nightmares. Castellan Roth, 34 years old, self-made billionaire, owner of Roth Enterprises, a commercial real estate empire that spanned 3 states and was rapidly expanding across the country. But those were just facts, statistics, numbers on a page. They didn't capture the truth of who he was. They called him the architect's nightmare, not because he was difficult to work with, but because he was impossible. He didn't just reject designs, he dismantled them, publicly, ruthlessly, with such precise, surgical cruelty that architects left meetings questioning their entire careers, their talents, their worth. USC, 3 architecture firms had gone bankrupt within 6 months of being associated with his projects. Not because he sued them or sabotaged them, but because once Castellan Roth rejected your work, the entire industry knew, and in their minds you became tainted, inadequate, not worth the risk. He was known for impossible standards, for changing requirements without warning, for showing up to presentations unannounced, and asking questions designed not to clarify, but to expose every flaw, every weakness, every shortcut in your thinking. And yet, every architect wanted to work with him, because if you survived Castellan Roth, if you created something he actually approved, you became a legend, but very few survived. Sienna stood slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. Castellan Roth, she repeated, tasting the bitterness of the name. What does he have to do with my project? Gregory turned from the window, and in the dim light of the conference room, he looked 10 years older than he had that morning. He bought it, Gregory said simply. 3 days ago. The Riverside property, the entire development rights, everything. Our client sold to him without telling us, and the first thing Roth did was review your design. Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs, and he tore it apart. Gregory's voice cracked, line by line, decision by decision. He called it, and I quote, aesthetically ambitious but structurally naive, the work of someone who understands beauty but not the brutal realities of commercial development. Each word was a knife. He didn't even meet with me, she heard herself say, her voice strange and distant. He didn't ask me to defend my choices, to explain my reasoning. He just dismissed me. Sienna, Gregory stepped toward her, his hand outstretched, but she moved away. You have to understand, this is what Roth does. He doesn't do consultations. He doesn't do second chances. He makes decisions and he moves on. And his decision is that you're not ready for a project of this magnitude. Not ready. Sienna Vale had not gotten to where she was by accepting other people's verdicts about her worth. She had been told, at 17, that architecture was too difficult for someone from a small town in Montana, that she should choose something more practical, more suited to her background. She had graduated top of her class from Cornell. She had been told, at 23, that the industry wasn't ready for her innovative approaches to sustainable design, that she should stick to traditional methods, play it safe. She had won the National Young Architect Award at 24. She had been told repeatedly that her gender would be a barrier in an industry dominated by men, that she would face resistance, skepticism, dismissal. She had designed the Patterson Tower, a 30-story mixed-use building that critics called breathtaking, and the future of urban architecture. Every obstacle had made her stronger. Every dismissal had sharpened her resolve. Every closed door had taught her to find a window or build her own entrance. And now, this man, this Castellan Roth, who had never met her, never heard her vision, never given her the basic respect of a conversation, had declared her not ready. Something inside Sienna shifted, not breaking, not bending, transforming. Where is he? She asked, her voice suddenly calm, dangerously calm. Gregory's eyes widened. Sienna, no, whatever you're thinking. Where is he? You can't just. Gregory ran his hands through his hair, pacing now. You don't understand. You don't approach Castellan Roth. You don't challenge him. You don't confront him. Everyone who has tried has. Has what? Sienna picked up her portfolio, her hand steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Failed, disappeared, had their careers destroyed? She moved toward the door. Then I'll be in excellent company. Sienna, please. Gregory's voice cracked with genuine desperation. I'm trying to protect you. Roth is still in the building. He's on the 50th floor, the executive level. But if you go up there, if you confront him about this, I can't save you. I can't save your career. I can't even save myself from the fallout when he destroys this entire firm for employing someone who dared to question him. Sienna paused, her hand on the door handle. Outside, the storm raged harder, lightning illuminating the city in brief, brilliant flashes. Gregory, she said softly, without turning around. Do you think my design was naive? Silence, long and heavy. No, Gregory finally whispered. I think it was brilliant. I think it was some of the best work I've ever seen, and that's why this is so hard. Sienna nodded slowly. Then I'm going to go tell Castellan Roth exactly that. Because if I don't stand up for my work, who will? She opened the door. Sienna. But she was already gone, her footsteps echoing down the hallway, heading toward the elevators, heading toward the 50th floor, heading toward the man who could destroy everything she'd built. She didn't know it yet, but Castellan Roth was about to destroy something far more dangerous than her career. He was about to destroy the carefully constructed walls around her heart, and she was about to do the same to him. The elevator ride to the 50th floor took 48 seconds. Sienna knew because she counted every single one, her heartbeat keeping time like a war drum. The elevator was glass-walled, offering a dizzying view of the city below. Chicago stretched out in every direction, its lights blurred by the rain, making it look like a watercolor painting, beautiful and uncertain, bleeding at the edges. Sienna watched her reflection in the glass, dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, though a few strands had escaped. Framing her face, gray suit, perfectly tailored, she looked calm, composed, professional. Inside, she was screaming, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" This was career suicide. She knew that, everyone knew that. You didn't confront Castellan Roth, you didn't demand explanations, you certainly didn't march uninvited into his private domain and challenge his judgments. But Sienna had learned a long time ago that the only opinions that truly mattered were the ones you held about yourself, and she knew that her design was exceptional, innovative, exactly what the Riverside project needed. If Castellan Roth couldn't see that, then maybe he wasn't as brilliant as everyone claimed. Or maybe she needed to make him see it. The elevator chimed softly. 48th floor, 49th floor, 50th floor. The doors opened, and Sienna stepped into another world entirely. If the floors below were impressive, the 50th floor was something else entirely. This wasn't an office. This was a statement, a declaration, a manifestation of absolute power translated into architecture and design. The entire floor was open concept, with walls of glass on every side offering 360-degree views of Chicago. The storm raged outside those windows, but inside, everything was controlled, perfect, intentional. The floors were black marble polished to a mirror shine. The furniture was minimal but clearly custom-made, each piece probably worth more than Sienna's annual salary. Modern art hung on the few interior walls, not reproductions, but originals. She recognized a Rothko, a Basquiat, pieces that belonged in museums, but it wasn't the luxury that struck her. It was the emptiness, the coldness of it all. This was a space designed to intimidate, not to welcome, to remind visitors of their insignificance, not make them comfortable. And at the far end of this vast, intimidating space, silhouetted against the storm-dark windows, stood a figure, a man. Even from this distance, even as just a shadow against the light, his presence was overwhelming. Castellan Roth. Sienna's breath caught in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, get back in the elevator, forget this insane confrontation. But she had come too far to retreat now. She took a step forward, then another. Her heels clicked against the marble, each sound echoing through the cavernous space, announcing her presence like a challenge. The figure at the window didn't move, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her at all. Sienna walked forward, her portfolio clutched against her chest like armor. 20 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet. And then, he spoke. His voice was deep, controlled, with an edge that could cut glass. The elevators to this floor, he said, still not turning, require a security clearance that you don't have, which means you either bypassed my security system, or you lied to my assistant. A pause, heavy with implication. Either way, he continued, you've already proven yourself willing to cross boundaries. The question is, why? Sienna stopped walking. She was close enough now to see his reflection in the rain-streaked windows, tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her car. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture perfect, radiating an authority that seemed almost physical. "My name," Sienna said, her voice stronger than she felt, "is Sienna Vale. I'm the architect whose design you rejected for the Riverside project. And I'm here because you made your judgment without ever speaking to me, without understanding my vision, without giving me the basic, professional courtesy of explaining what you found inadequate." Silence, long and dangerous. Then, slowly, he turned, and Sienna's world tilted. She had expected many things from Castellan Roth: arrogance, coldness, the kind of corporate shark that wore expensive suits and dead eyes. What she hadn't expected was him. He was younger than she'd imagined. 34, she knew from the articles, but something about his presence had made her picture someone older, harder, more worn down by the ruthlessness of his reputation. Instead, he was devastating. Not handsome in a conventional way. Handsome was too soft a word for what Castellan Roth was. He had the kind of face that belonged on ancient coins or classical sculptures. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled but would be dangerous when it did. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Dark, intelligent, absolutely relentless. They swept over her with the precision of a scanner, taking in every detail in a matter of seconds. Her suit, her posture, the portfolio she held, the rain in her hair from the storm outside, and then the slightest hint of something in those eyes. Not quite amusement, not quite interest. "Sienna Vale," he said, her name rolling off his tongue like he was tasting it, testing it. "The architect from Morrison and Hayes, 28 years old, Cornell graduate, won the National Young Architect Award 3 years ago, designed the Patterson Tower." He recited her credentials like he was reading from a file, which meant he'd researched her, known about her before dismissing her work. Somehow, that made it worse. "You've done your homework," Sienna said, keeping her voice level despite the way her pulse was racing, "which makes your rejection even more confusing. If you knew my qualifications, my track record, my capabilities, why dismiss my design without even a conversation?" Castellan moved away from the windows, walking toward a massive desk of dark wood and steel. His movements were controlled, economical, like a predator that never wasted energy. "You're assuming," he said, "that your qualifications matter more than the quality of your work." The words hit like a slap. "My work," Sienna said tightly, "is exceptional. Your work," Castellan corrected, finally looking directly at her, "is aesthetically ambitious but structurally naive. It prioritizes beauty over functionality, vision over viability. It's the kind of design that wins awards, but fails in the real world." Each word was precise, deliberate, designed to cut, and it was working. But Sienna hadn't come this far to crumble under criticism, no matter how beautifully delivered. "You're wrong," she said simply. For the first time, something shifted in Castellan's expression. The slightest narrowing of his eyes, a barely perceptible tension in his jaw. "Excuse me, you're wrong," Sienna repeated, stepping forward, opening her portfolio on his desk despite his obvious surprise at her boldness. "You looked at my design and saw what you expected to see. A young architect trying to make a statement. Someone more concerned with aesthetics than practicality. But you didn't look deeper. You didn't see the innovation." She pulled out the structural analysis, her hands moving quickly, pointing to specific elements. "The Riverside integration isn't just beautiful, it's functional. It reduces the building's environmental impact by 40%. The curved facade you probably thought was purely aesthetic. It's designed to optimize natural light and reduce heating costs by 30%. The unconventional support structure? It allows for flexible, interior spaces that can adapt to changing commercial needs over decades, not just years." She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "I don't design buildings that just look good, Mr. Roth. I design buildings that work, that last, that respect both the people who use them and the environment they exist in. If you can't see that, then maybe the problem isn't my vision. Maybe it's your perspective." The silence that followed was absolute. Outside, thunder rumbled. Inside, Castellan Roth stared at her with an expression she couldn't read. Anger, surprise, respect, and then he did something completely unexpected. He smiled, not a warm smile, not friendly or encouraging, but a smile that suggested he'd just found something interesting, a puzzle worth solving, a challenge worth accepting. You came up here, he said slowly, knowing I could destroy your career with a single phone call, knowing that confronting me is professional suicide, knowing that I don't give second chances or entertain debates about my decisions. And you did it anyway. He leaned back against his desk, crossing his arms, studying her. Why? Sienna lifted her chin. Because I'm not afraid of you. Liar. The word was soft, almost gentle, but it struck home. I can see your pulse racing in your throat, Castellan continued. I can see the way your hands are trembling even though you're trying to hide it. I can see the fear in your eyes, Miss Vale. You're terrified, but you're here anyway. He pushed off from the desk, moving closer. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. I haven't decided which yet. They stood there, mere feet apart, the storm raging outside, the city sprawling below. Two people locked in a battle of wills. That felt like it would determine everything. So here's what's going to happen, Castellan said finally. I'm going to give you a chance to prove me wrong. One chance. You're going to come work directly for me, not for Morrison and Hayes, for Roth Enterprises. You're going to redesign the Riverside project from the ground up, with my supervision, my specifications, my standards. If your design is as good as you claim, you'll prove it. And if I'm right about your naivety, we'll both know soon enough. His eyes glittered with something dangerous. But either way, Miss Vale, you're going to work for me now. And if I refuse? Castellan's smile widened, sharp as broken glass. Then you've wasted both of our time with this dramatic confrontation. And I don't appreciate having my time wasted. Sienna stared at him, her mind racing. This was insane. Working directly for Castellan Roth would be like walking into a lion's den and asking to stay for dinner. Everything she'd heard about him suggested it would be brutal, demanding, possibly impossible. But it was also an opportunity, a chance to prove herself to the most demanding critic in the industry, to show that her vision could withstand his scrutiny, and maybe a chance to understand the man behind the monster. I'll do it, she heard herself say. But I have one condition. Castellan raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to make demands. When I prove you wrong, Sienna said firmly, when my design exceeds your standards, you publicly acknowledge it. You tell the industry that you were wrong about me, that Sienna Vale's vision is exactly what modern architecture needs. For a long moment, Castellan just looked at her. Then he extended his hand. Deal. But when I prove you wrong, you walk away from architecture, permanently. Sienna's heart stopped. Walk away? From the only thing she'd ever loved, the only thing she'd ever been truly good at. But she looked at her design, spread across his desk, looked at the innovation, the care, the countless hours of work she'd poured into making something extraordinary. She believed in it. She had to. Deal, she said, taking his hand. His grip was firm, warm. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system, and from the way his eyes darkened slightly, she knew he felt it too. They stood there, hands clasped, a deal made that would change everything. Neither of them knew it yet, but this wasn't just a professional arrangement they'd entered into. This was the beginning of a war, a collision, a transformation that would tear down everything they thought they knew about themselves, and rebuild it into something neither of them could have imagined. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, a different kind of storm was just beginning. Sienna didn't sleep that night. How could she? She just bet everything, her career, her future, her entire identity on a handshake with a man who destroyed people for sport, a man whose dark eyes had looked at her like she was a fascinating problem to be solved, or a mistake to be corrected. At 4 in the morning, she'd given up on sleep entirely and started preparing, research, analysis. She pulled every interview, every scrap of information about Castellan Roth's previous projects. She studied his patterns, his preferences in architectural choices, and what she discovered chilled her. By 7 a.m., Sienna stood outside Roth Tower, staring up at the 70-story giant of steel and glass. Her new workplace, her new battleground. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. 50th floor, 7:30 a.m., don't be late. I despise lateness almost as much as I despise mediocrity. Sienna checked her watch. 7:15 a.m., she had 15 minutes. She'd worn her armor today, hair pulled back severely, not a strand out of place. Minimal makeup except for red lipstick, a small rebellion, a reminder to herself that she wouldn't be erased by his world. She walked through the revolving doors, her heels clicking against marble that probably cost more per square foot than most people's homes. The elevator ride up felt different this time. Yesterday, she'd been fueled by anger, by indignation. Today she was walking into something she'd agreed to, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The elevator doors opened at exactly 7:29 am, and Sienna stepped into chaos. The 50th floor looked completely different in daylight. Yesterday's intimidating emptiness had been transformed. The open space was now divided by temporary glass partitions, creating workstations, conference areas, display walls covered in architectural renderings and project timelines, and people. At least a dozen people moving with purposeful intensity, all of them looking like they'd been here for hours already. A woman approached Sienna immediately, tall, elegant, probably in her early 40s, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a perfect chignon. She wore a designer suit that screamed expensive taste and carried an iPad like it was an extension of her body. Sienna Vale? Her voice was crisp, professional, with an undertone of appraisal. I'm Vivian Cross, Mr. Roth's executive assistant. You're expected in the main conference room. Am I early? Sienna asked, confused by the bustling activity around her. Something that might have been sympathy flickered across Vivian's face. No, Miss Vale, you're exactly on time, which, in Mr. Roth's world, means you're already behind. Before Sienna could respond, Vivian was already walking, her pace brisk and unforgiving. Sienna hurried to keep up. They passed workstations where people were already deep in concentration. She caught glimpses of architectural software on screens, 3D renderings. Everyone looked focused, like they were working against an impossible deadline. How many people work on this floor? Currently, 15. By the end of the week, 25. Vivian didn't slow down. Mr. Roth is assembling a team for the Riverside project. You're not the only architect he's brought in. The words hit Sienna like ice water. What? Vivian stopped at a glass door, her hand on the handle. She looked at Sienna with something that definitely was sympathy now. Did you think you were special, Miss Vale? That he was giving you an exclusive opportunity? She shook her head slightly. Mr. Roth doesn't believe in single-point failures. He's brought in 5 architects. All of you will redesign the Riverside project. And at the end of 30 days, he'll choose one design, one architect, the rest. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Vivian opened the door, and Sienna found herself in a conference room that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Chicago in the morning light. The lake stretched out like liquid silver. The city glowed, but Sienna barely noticed the view, because sitting around the conference table were 4 other people. And from the portfolios, the laptops, the way they looked at her when she entered, these were her competition. Sienna had faced competition before. Architecture school had been cutthroat, the professional world even more so. But this, his was different. These weren't just architects. These were predators in designer suits, each one radiating a confidence that came from years of victories, prestigious projects, industry recognition. The final contestant arrives, a smooth voice said from the far end of the table. A man in his early 40s, salt and pepper hair styled perfectly, expensive watch glinting as he gestured dismissively. He looked Sienna up and down with barely concealed amusement. "I'm Damien Frost," he continued, leaning back in his chair with the casual arrogance of someone who never doubted his superiority. "Lead architect at Frost and Associates. Perhaps you've heard of us. We designed the Meridian Complex in New York, the Helsinki Tower in Finland. We know who you are, Damien," a woman interrupted coolly. She was striking late 30s, sharp features, eyes like a hawk assessing prey. Her accent was faintly British, refined and cutting. "Elena Volkov." She introduced herself to Sienna without offering a hand. "I specialize in sustainable megastructures. I assume you're Sienna Vale, the Patterson Tower architect?" There was something in the way she said it, not quite dismissive, but evaluative, like she was measuring Sienna against some internal standard and finding her interesting, perhaps, but not threatening. "That's one of my projects, yes," Sienna said carefully, moving to take one of the empty seats. "A pretty building," a young man said from across the table. He couldn't have been older than 30, with dark-rimmed glasses and the kind of casual confidence that came from being a prodigy. "Aesthetically pleasing, though I noticed some structural inefficiencies in the load distribution that." "Marcus Chen," Elena interjected, MIT graduate, youngest architect to win the Pritzker Prize, and insufferably smug about it. Marcus grinned, not at all offended. "Guilty, but at least I'm honest about my genius." The fourth person at the table hadn't spoken yet, an older man, probably in his 60s, with weathered features and eyes that had seen everything. He sat quietly, a notebook in front of him, observing the others with patient detachment. "And you are?" Sienna asked. "Thomas Whitmore," he said simply. His voice was deep, gentle, with a warmth the others lacked. "I've been in this business for 40 years. Designed hospitals, schools, community centers. Nothing glamorous but necessary." There was something about the way he said it that made Sienna like him immediately. He wasn't here to compete. He was here because he genuinely cared about good design, which meant, Sienna realized with a sinking feeling, that he was going to be crushed in this competition. "So," Damien said, lacing his fingers together, "we're all here to audition for Castellan Roth's approval. How humiliating for some of us, I imagine. Though I suppose when you're young and unproven, you take opportunities wherever you can find them." The barb was clearly aimed at Sienna and Marcus. "Careful, Damien," Marcus shot back. "Your age is showing, along with your insecurity." "Gentlemen," Elena said with icy amusement, "save the peacocking for when it matters. We're not competing against each other. We're competing against Roth's impossible standards, which, statistically, none of us will meet." "How encouraging," Thomas murmured. "It's realistic," Elena continued. "Castellan Roth has rejected designs from the top 50 architects in the world. What makes any of us think we're special?" "Because we are," Sienna heard herself say. Everyone turned to look at her. "We're here because somewhere in our work, Roth saw something worth testing. Maybe it's our innovation. Maybe it's our technical skill. Maybe it's just our audacity." She met each of their eyes in turn. "But we're all here for a reason, and I, for one, don't plan to fail just because the odds are against me." Silence fell over the table. Then Marcus laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "I like her." "Of course you do," Damien muttered. "Youth recognizing youth. Optimism is charming," Elena said. "Until reality crushes it." Thomas simply nodded at Sienna, a small smile of approval on his weathered face. And then, the temperature in the room dropped. Not literally, but Sienna felt it. Everyone felt it. A presence, commanding, absolute. The glass door opened, and Castellan Roth walked in. If Sienna had thought Castellan was imposing last night in the dim light and storm, she'd been completely unprepared for him in the full light of day. He moved with the controlled precision of a chess master, every step calculated, every gesture economical. His suit today was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to his athletic frame, with a black shirt and no tie, a small rebellion against corporate uniformity that somehow made him look even more powerful. But it was his eyes that dominated the room, those dark, relentless eyes that swept across the 5 assembled architects, like a general reviewing troops before battle. "Good morning," he said, his voice filling the space effortlessly. Not loud, he didn't need to be loud. "I see you've all arrived. On time. No less. Excellent. We'll see if you maintain that discipline under pressure." He moved to the head of the table but didn't sit. Instead, he stood, hands resting on the back of the chair, radiating authority. "Let me be clear about why you're here," Castellan continued. "I don't believe in single-point solutions. Every one of you represents a different approach to architecture, a different philosophy, a different set of strengths. Damien, your traditional excellence, proven methodologies, safe bets." Damien straightened, looking pleased despite the faint insult in being called safe. "Elena, your innovation wrapped in sustainability, ambitious projects that push environmental boundaries." Elena inclined her head, accepting the assessment. "Marcus, your pure technical genius, mathematical precision, structural artistry." Marcus grinned behind his glasses. "Thomas, your humanity in architecture, designs that serve people first, ego last." Thomas said nothing, but something warm flickered in his eyes. And then Castellan's gaze landed on Sienna. "And Sienna Vale," he paused, letting the moment stretch. "You're the wild card, unproven on this scale, but possessing something the others have forgotten or never had: raw creative courage, the willingness to risk failure for the possibility of brilliance." Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. She couldn't tell if that was a compliment or a prediction of her downfall. "Over the next 30 days, Castellan said, his attention returning to the group, each of you will design a complete proposal for the Riverside Commercial Complex. You'll have access to the full site surveys, environmental reports, zoning documentation, and budget projections. You'll also have access to my team engineers, environmental consultants, financial analysts." He began walking around the table now, a slow orbit that felt like a predator circling prey. "But understand this, I will be directly involved in this process. I will review your work. I will question your choices. I will challenge your assumptions. And if I find your work lacking..." He stopped behind Sienna's chair. She could feel the heat of his presence, the weight of his attention. "I will not be gentle in my critique. This is an architecture school. This isn't a mentorship program. This is a $60 million project that will define a significant portion of Chicago's riverfront for the next 50 years. Mediocrity isn't just unacceptable, it's dangerous." "Understood," Elena said crisply. The others murmured agreement. "Good." Castellan moved back to the head of the table. "You'll each be assigned a workspace on this floor. You'll have individual time with me 3 times a week: Monday, Wednesday, Friday at rotating times. Vivian will provide your schedules. You're free to collaborate or compete as you see fit. But remember, only one of you will succeed." "What happens to the others?" Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't worried about being in that group. Castellan's expression didn't change. "The others will have excellent portfolio pieces and the distinction of having been considered for a Roth Enterprises project. Whether that helps or hinders your careers depends on how gracefully you handle rejection." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. "Any questions?" Sienna raised her hand before she could stop herself. Castellan's gaze locked onto her. "Miss Vale, you said we're free to collaborate or compete, but in architecture, some of the best innovations come from unexpected partnerships. What if 2 of us wanted to submit a joint proposal?" The question seemed to surprise everyone, including Castellan. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her. "Why would you even suggest that?" he asked. "You'd be splitting the recognition, the compensation, the opportunity. Or," Sienna said carefully, "we'd be combining strengths to create something better than either of us could alone. Isn't that more important than individual glory?" For a long moment, Castellan didn't respond. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. That same dangerous smile from last night. Collaboration is permitted, he said slowly. Though I suspect you'll find that in a competition with these stakes, trust is a luxury no one can afford. He checked his watch. Probably worth more than Sienna's entire year of student loans. You have 2 hours to settle into your workspaces and review the project materials. At noon, we'll have our first group session, where I'll detail the specific challenges of the Riverside site. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Miss Vale? A word privately. Sienna's stomach dropped. The other architects filed out, some casting curious glances back at her. Marcus gave her a sympathetic grimace. Thomas nodded encouragingly. Elena and Damien simply left, uninterested in anyone's drama but their own. And then Sienna was alone with Castellan Roth. Again, the door clicked shut with a finality that made Sienna's pulse spike. That question, he finally said, about collaboration, that wasn't casual curiosity, was it? Sienna took a breath. No. You're already strategizing. Already thinking about how to gain an advantage. He turned to face her, and something in his expression was different, not softer. Exactly, but more complex. You surprise me, Sienna Vale. The use of her first name, without the formal Miss Vale, sent an unexpected shiver through her. Is that good or bad? She asked. I haven't decided yet. He moved closer, and Sienna had to fight the urge to step back, not from fear, from something else, something that felt dangerous in a completely different way. I brought you here because you challenged me, Castellan said quietly. Because you walked into my office, uninvited, and told me I was wrong. Do you know how rare that is? I imagine very. Very is an understatement. People don't challenge me, Sienna. They defer. They comply. They bend. His eyes searched hers. You didn't bend. Should I have? No, the word was immediate. But now you're in a situation where that same quality, that refusal to bend, will be tested every single day. By me, by this project, by your own doubts. He was close enough now that Sienna could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes, could smell the subtle expensive cologne he wore, could feel the heat radiating from his body. The others out there, Castellan continued, they're excellent architects, but they're here for their careers, for the prestige, for the addition to their portfolios. He paused, his gaze intensifying. Why are you here, Sienna, really? The question caught her off guard, not because she didn't know the answer, but because the answer felt too revealing, too honest. Because, she said slowly, I need to know if I'm as good as I think I am, or if I've been fooling myself. Castellan's expression shifted, something that might have been recognition, or respect, or understanding. That's dangerous, he said softly. What is? Needing external validation to define your worth. He stepped back, breaking the intensity of the moment, but his eyes never left hers. It means I have power over you, power to lift you up or destroy you. And Sienna, he moved toward the door. I've destroyed everyone who's given me that power. The words should have sounded like a threat. Instead, they sounded like a warning, almost like he was trying to protect her from himself. Then maybe, Sienna said to his retreating back, I'll be the first one you don't destroy. Castellan stopped, his hand on the door handle. He didn't turn around, but she saw his shoulders tense. Or, he said quietly, you'll be the one who destroys me. And then he was gone, leaving Sienna alone, in the conference room with the city, sprawling below and her heart racing with something that definitely wasn't just professional ambition. What had she gotten herself into? Vivian found Sienna 10 minutes later. Miss Vale, your workspace is ready. The message was clear. You can work independently, but you'll always be aware of your competition. Sienna's station was in the corner, which she immediately recognized as both a blessing and a curse. Everyone who walked by could see her working or struggling. Your computer is already set up, Vivian explained, her tone professional. Password is on the sticky note. You have access to the shared drive with all the project materials, site surveys, environmental studies, zoning regulations, budget parameters. There is also a folder with Mr. Roth's previous projects for reference. For reference, Sienna repeated. To see what he likes, to see what he demands, Vivian corrected. There's a difference. Mr. Roth doesn't have preferences. He has standards. What if those standards conflict with good design? Vivian's expression softened slightly. Then you'll have to convince him otherwise. Which, I should mention, only 3 people in the history of this company have successfully done. Vivian handed her a tablet. This is your schedule. Your first one-on-one with Mr. Roth is Monday at 2 p.m. I suggest you come, prepared with more than just enthusiasm. Vivian left Sienna alone in her new workspace. Sienna sat down in the expensive ergonomic chair, stared at the blank screen before her, and took a deep breath. 30 days to design something that would exceed Castellan Roth's impossible standards. 30 days to prove she belonged in this world. 30 days to either achieve her dreams or walk away from architecture forever. She logged into the computer and opened the project files. And as the Riverside site data flooded across her screen, the measurements, the soil composition, the water table depths, the zoning restrictions, Sienna felt something ignite inside her chest. Not fear, not anymore. Determination. Castellan Roth wanted to see what she was capable of. She was about to show him a vision of architecture he'd never imagined. And maybe, just maybe, she was about to discover who she truly was beneath all the doubts and fears and desperate need for validation. Outside her glass partition, she could see the other architects settling into their workspaces. Damien with his precisely organized desk, Elena with multiple monitors already displaying complex calculations, Marcus with headphones on, fingers flying across his keyboard, Thomas with an actual sketchpad drawing by hand like architecture used to be done. Each of them brilliant, each of them desperate to win, each of them her enemy for the next 30 days. But as Sienna looked at the Riverside project, the potential waiting to be unleashed, she realized something profound. She wasn't competing against them. She was competing against herself, against her own limitations, against the voice in her head that whispered she wasn't good enough. And that was a competition she intended to win. Day 3, 11 p.m., and Sienna was still at her desk. The 50th floor had emptied hours ago. The cleaning crew had come and gone. Now it was just Sienna. She'd been digging through the historical survey documents for hours. Not the recent ones. Everyone would be looking at those. No, Sienna had gone deeper into the archives. Property records dating back to the 1920s, old photographs, newspaper clippings. If there was one thing her mentor in college had taught her, it was this: every piece of land has a story, and the best designs honor that story instead of erasing it. She'd found the usual things. The Riverside property had been industrial land originally, a textile factory in the 1932nd, briefly a jazz club in the 1952nd, abandoned. In the 1970s, vacant. Ever since, slowly being reclaimed by nature while the city grew around it. But then, she found something else. A photograph, black and white, faded with age. Dated 1952, it showed the jazz club in its heyday, the Sapphire Room. The marquee proclaimed in elegant script. But it wasn't the building that caught Sienna's attention. It was what lay beneath it. In the corner of the photograph, barely visible, was a sign pointing to stairs going down, and written on that sign, in letters she had to zoom in to read, "The underground garden, a hidden paradise." Sienna's heart started racing. She pulled up the current site surveys, the ground-penetrating radar scans, the geological reports, and there it was, a void space beneath the property. The engineers had noted it as possible foundation remnant and moved on, but Sienna knew better. This wasn't a foundation remnant. This was a deliberately constructed underground space, and from the photograph's description, it had been something beautiful, something magical. An underground garden in 1950s Chicago. How had no one else discovered this? She dug deeper, found a newspaper article from 1953, The Sapphire Room's Secret Garden, where nature meets jazz in the most unexpected place. The article described an elaborate, underground space where the club's owner, a woman named Delphine Moreau, had created an impossible garden. Real trees growing under artificial sunlight, a fountain, stone pathways, a place where Chicago's elite would go after the jazz sets ended, to dance and dream in a hidden Eden. And then nothing. The club had closed in 1956. The property was abandoned. Sienna stared at her screen, her mind racing with possibilities. What if she could restore it? What if her design didn't just build on the land, but honored what lay beneath, created something that bridged the past and the future? It would be risky. It would require significant structural modifications. It would be brilliant. She was so absorbed in her discovery that she didn't hear the footsteps behind her, didn't notice the presence until a voice, smooth and amused, spoke from the darkness. Well, someone's dedicated or insane. I haven't decided which yet. Her heart leaping into her throat. A man stood in her workspace doorway. Not Castellan. This presence was completely different, lighter, warmer, like sunshine compared to Castellan's storm. He was younger than Castellan, maybe late 20s, with the kind of effortlessly handsome features that belonged on magazine covers. And he was smiling at her like they were sharing a delightful secret. Sorry, he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. Didn't mean to startle you, though you should probably be more aware of your surroundings. This building does have security, but still. Late night, empty floor, mysterious stranger appears. He grinned wider. This is how horror movies start. Sienna's pulse was still racing, but now from surprise rather than fear. Who are you? And how did you get up here? Right, introductions. He walked into her workspace with the easy confidence of someone who belonged everywhere. I'm Julian Roth, Castellan's younger brother, and I got up here because, technically, I own 20% of this building. Sienna stared at him, trying to reconcile this warm, charming man with the cold, ruthless Castellan Roth. They looked nothing alike. Where Castellan was dark intensity and controlled power, Julian was light and effortless charm. I didn't know Castellan had a brother, Sienna said carefully. Most people don't. Julian perched on the edge of her desk, completely at ease. Cass prefers to keep me, let's say, off the official record. I'm the family disappointment, you see. While he built an empire, I became a photographer. While he conquered commercial real estate, I traveled the world taking pictures of strangers and landscapes. Terribly impractical, but there was something in the way he said it beneath the self-deprecating humor that suggested the situation was more complicated than he was letting on. A photographer, Sienna repeated. That's not disappointing. That's art. Julian's smile shifted, became more genuine. I like you already. Most people in Cass's world think anything that doesn't generate quarterly profits is a waste of time. He glanced at her computer screen. So what are you working on so late? Let me guess, trying to crack the code of Castellan Roth's impossible standards? Sienna hesitated. Should she tell him about her discovery? He was Castellan's brother, but he seemed different, trustworthy even. Or maybe that was exactly what made him dangerous. Just research, she said vaguely. Julian laughed, a bright sound that seemed to push back the darkness of the empty floor. You're smart. Don't trust me just because I have a friendly face. Wise policy in this family. He stood, moving to look out the windows at the city. But for what it's worth, I'm not here to spy on you for my brother. I'm actually here because I heard about his little architect competition and got curious. Curious about what? About the 5 people brave enough or foolish enough to agree to it. He turned back to her, and his expression had grown more serious. Do you know why Castellan is the way he is? Why he's so ruthless, so impossibly demanding? Sienna shook her head. Julian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost all its playful tone. 7 years ago, our father was building a commercial complex in Seattle. The architect was brilliant, visionary, everything our father wanted. But he cut corners, made compromises he shouldn't have made. And 6 months after the building opened, there was a structural failure. Sienna felt her blood run cold. 17 people died, Julian continued softly, including our father. He was there for an inspection when the floor collapsed. And Castellan was supposed to be there too, but he'd stayed late at a meeting in Chicago. The guilt of surviving, the horror of watching our father's dream become a tomb. He paused, his green eyes haunted now. It destroyed something in him, made him into what he is now, someone who trusts no one, believes in nothing but absolute perfection, and would rather tear down 100 brilliant designs than risk a single compromised one. The revelation hit Sienna like a physical blow. Suddenly, Castellan's impossible standards made terrible sense. His ruthlessness, his refusal to accept anything less than perfection. He wasn't just demanding, he was terrified. "Why are you telling me this?" Sienna asked quietly. Julian turned back to the windows. "Because I've watched my brother become more isolated, more unreachable every year. And I've watched architect after architect try to please him, fail, and walk away hating him. But you," he looked at her with those piercing green eyes. "Vivian told me what you did, how you stormed into his office uninvited, how you challenged him. No one does that. And the fact that he didn't destroy you immediately, that he brought you here instead." Julian smiled sadly. "That means something. Maybe something important. Or maybe," Sienna said, "it means he's going to enjoy destroying me even more." "Maybe." Julian moved toward the door. "But I don't think so. I think you might be the first person in 7 years who's reminded him what it feels like to be challenged by an equal, instead of a subordinate." He paused at the doorway. "Whatever you've discovered tonight," he said, nodding toward her computer, "whatever brilliant idea is making your eyes light up like that, don't let fear make you compromise it. Show him something real, something that honors the land's history, not just its potential profit. That's what he needs to see, even if he doesn't know it yet." And then Julian Roth disappeared into the darkness of the hallway, leaving Sienna alone with her discovery and a completely new understanding of the man she was trying to impress. Sienna stood outside Castellan's private office. She'd spent the entire weekend researching, planning, sketching. She'd barely slept, barely eaten, but she was ready. The door opened before she could knock. Vivian stood there, elegant as always. "He's ready for you, Miss Vale, and a word of warning, he's already dismissed 2 of the other architects this morning. He's not in a generous mood." Her stomach dropped. "Dismissed already? But we've only had 3 days. Elena Volkov proposed a design too similar to his existing projects. Damien Frost suggested traditional methods that offered nothing innovative. Both were thanked for their time and escorted out. To down 3 remaining. The competition had just become significantly more brutal. Sienna walked into Castellan's office, and the door clicked shut behind her with ominous finality. Castellan sat behind his desk, reviewing documents with the intense focus of a surgeon examining X-rays. He didn't acknowledge her presence at all. A power play, making her wait, making her feel uncertain. She walked to the chair opposite his desk and sat down, placing her portfolio on the edge of his desk with a gentle but deliberate thud. That got his attention. Castellan's eyes lifted from his documents, meeting hers with that dark, unreadable gaze. "Bold," he said quietly. "Sitting without being invited. I dismissed someone this morning for exactly that kind of presumption." Sienna said calmly, "I'm not here to be safe, Mr. Roth. You already know that." Something flickered in his expression. "Very well, Miss Vale. You have 15 minutes to convince me your approach to the Riverside project has merit. Impress me." She opened her portfolio and pulled out the photograph. The 1952 image of the Sapphire Room and its mysterious underground garden. "Tell me, Mr. Roth," she said, sliding the photograph across his desk. "When you look at the Riverside property, what do you see?" Castellan glanced at the photograph, then back at her. "I see a blank canvas, potential waiting to be realized, empty land that could become something profitable and architecturally significant." "You see emptiness," Sienna said softly. I see history. She pulled out the newspaper clipping. The article about Delphine Moreau's impossible garden beneath a jazz club. Beneath that property, Sienna continued, there's a forgotten space. A woman named Delphine Moreau created an underground garden in 1952, a place where nature and art and music collided in the most unexpected way. It was destroyed when the club closed, but the structure is still there. She pulled out the geological survey, marked with her annotations. And I propose we don't erase it, we restore it. We build a commercial complex that doesn't just sit on the land, it integrates with its history. A building where the past and future exist together. Castellan had gone very still. His eyes moved from the photograph to the article, his expression unreadable. Explain, he said. The building itself would be modern, she explained, her voice alive with passion now. Glass and steel, sustainable materials, everything you'd expect from a contemporary commercial complex. But the ground floor would be different. She spread out a cross-section drawing. Instead of traditional retail space, the ground floor would be a public atrium, open, welcoming, with a central feature, a glass floor. Castellan's eyebrow raised. A glass floor, not just any glass floor. A floor that looks down into the restored underground garden. Visitors would walk above it, see the history literally beneath their feet. The garden would be accessible through a grand staircase echoing the original entrance from the Sapphire Room. It would be a public space, a museum, a living piece of Chicago's forgotten cultural heritage. She pulled out another sketch showing the underground space. We'd restore the original garden as authentically as possible. Real trees, using modern horticultural technology to keep them healthy underground. The fountain Delphine Moreau built, stone pathways, but we'd also add something new: performance space, small concerts, art installations, a rotating exhibit celebrating the jazz heritage of the 1950s. She looked up, meeting Castellan's intense gaze. You build buildings that are self-contained, isolated, perfect, but separate from the communities around them. This would be different. This would be a building that connects, that remembers what came before instead of erasing it. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Castellan stood slowly, moving to the windows, his back to her. Sienna couldn't read his body language, couldn't tell if she'd impressed him or committed professional suicide. Do you know, he finally said, his voice quiet and strange, how many architects have presented to me in the last 7 years? No, sir, hundreds, literally hundreds. He turned, and his expression was complicated, raw in a way she'd never seen before. And every single one of them has tried to show me what I want to see, what they think will please me, what they believe matches my aesthetic, my philosophy, my vision. He walked back toward his desk, but he didn't sit. Instead, he stood there, looking at her sketches with an intensity that felt almost painful. You are the first one, he continued, who's shown me something I didn't know I needed to see. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Was that good? Was that? It's impractical, Castellan said suddenly, his voice hardening. Restoring a 70-year-old underground structure would be enormously expensive. The engineering challenges alone would add months to the timeline. The public space you're proposing would reduce the commercial retail square footage significantly, impacting projected revenue. Furthermore, he continued, the historical preservation requirements would be nightmarish. City approvals, historical society reviews, permits that could take years to secure. He set the sketch down carefully. It's impractical, it's expensive, it's complicated, and it's absolutely brilliant. Sienna's breath caught. He looked at her directly, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something genuine in his eyes. Not the cold calculation, not the ruthless assessment. Wonder. This is what architecture should be, he said softly. Not just functional, not just beautiful, but meaningful, connected to place, to history, to the human experience. He moved around the desk, and suddenly he was very close to her, close enough that she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell with carefully controlled breathing. "I'm going to make this very difficult for you," Castellan said. "I'm going to question every design choice. I'm going to push you to justify every decision. I'm going to make you defend this vision until you either prove its viability or it breaks under the pressure." "I understand," Sienna managed to say. "No," Castellan said, and his voice dropped to something almost intimate. "I don't think you do. Because if this works, if you can actually execute this vision, it won't just be a building. It will change how people think about commercial architecture, about preservation, about the relationship between past and future." He paused, his dark eyes searching hers. "And it will change me, whether I want it to or not." The admission seemed to cost him something. Sienna could see it in the tension of his jaw, the way his hands clenched briefly before relaxing. "Your 15 minutes are up," Castellan said, stepping back, professional distance returning like armor. "But I'm extending your timeline. You have the full 30 days, and I want weekly presentations. Every Monday, 2 p.m., show me your progress. Convince me this impossible vision can become reality." "And the others?" Sienna asked. "Marcus and Thomas?" "Marcus Chen is pursuing a purely technical approach, mathematically precise but emotionally empty. Thomas Whitmore is designing something beautiful but too small scale for the site. Both are talented, but neither has shown me what you just showed me." He moved back to his desk, the moment of vulnerability closing like a door. "Dismissed, Miss Vale and Sienna?" She turned at the doorway. "Don't let me down. I don't handle disappointment well." It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like hope, like she'd just awakened something in Castellan Roth that had been dormant for 7 years, something that terrified him, and something that, despite every instinct screaming at her to be careful, was starting to terrify her too, because this wasn't just professional anymore. This was personal, and neither of them was prepared for where that would lead. She left his office feeling like she'd just survived a hurricane. She'd impressed him. The impossible he had called her vision brilliant. "Well, you're not crying or storming out, so I'm guessing that went better than Damien's meeting." Sienna looked up to find Julian leaning against the hallway wall, camera hanging from his neck, that familiar warm smile on his face. "You're still here," she said, surprised. "I never left. I've been photographing the city from various floors. Architectural photography is one of my specialties." He pushed off from the wall. "But I'm starving, and you look like you could use some air that doesn't smell like corporate ambition and expensive cologne." "Coffee?" Sienna hesitated. She should get back to work. She had sketches to refine, calculations to verify, permits to research. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Coffee sounds perfect." 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a small cafe 3 blocks from Roth Tower. It was the complete opposite of the sleek, intimidating spaces Sienna had become accustomed to. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, the smell of fresh-baked pastries and espresso. It felt human. "So," Julian said, wrapping his hands around a massive mug of coffee, "are you going to tell me what happened in there? Or do I have to guess from your shell-shocked expression?" Sienna laughed despite herself. "He liked my concept. Or at least, he didn't immediately destroy it." High praise from Castellan Roth. Julian's green eyes sparkled. "What's the concept?" Sienna found herself explaining the underground garden, the historical preservation, the vision of connecting past and future. Julian listened intently, and unlike Castellan, his expressions were easy to read: fascination, excitement, genuine appreciation. "That's extraordinary," he said when she finished. "And it's exactly what that property needs. What this whole city needs, honestly. We're so focused on building new, bigger, shinier. We forget that places have souls, memories." He pulled out his camera, flipping through recent images. "See this?" He showed her a photograph of an old theater, half demolished. This was the Regal Theater on the south side, one of the most important venues for Black entertainers during segregation. Legends performed there, and they're tearing it down for luxury condos. Another image, an old factory with beautiful brickwork and Art Deco details. This was the Pullman factory, where the first sleeping cars were built. History in every brick, being replaced by a distribution center. Julian's voice had grown passionate, his usually playful demeanor shifting into something more serious. I've been documenting disappearing Chicago for 3 years, he explained. All these places we're losing, and no one seems to care because progress and profit matter more than memory. He looked at Sienna directly. But you care, your design cares, and if you can show Castellan that honoring history can coexist with commercial success, he smiled. You might just change more than one building, you might change how he sees the world. Your brother, she said carefully, is that what you want? For him to change? Julian was quiet for a long moment. 7 years ago, he finally said, before our father died, he was different. He was still serious, still driven, but he was warm. He laughed. He believed in the beauty of architecture, not just its functionality. We were close. His voice cracked slightly. And then the Seattle collapse happened, and I watched him die inside. Not literally, he was in Chicago when it happened, but the brother I knew, he died that day anyway, replaced by this fortress. This man who trusts nothing, feels nothing, builds walls so high that even I can't reach him anymore. Sienna's heart ached. She understood now. The ruthlessness, the impossible standards, the isolation. Castellan Roth wasn't cruel. He was broken, and he'd spent 7 years making sure no one could see the cracks. I don't know if I can change him, Sienna said honestly. I'm just trying to survive working with him. Julian smiled, but it was sad. You already have changed him. You just don't see it yet. The fact that he called your vision brilliant, the fact that he's giving you 30 days, instead of dismissing you after one meeting like he did with the others, that means something. He reached across the table, touching her hand briefly. Just be careful, Sienna. My brother doesn't know how to let people in anymore. If he starts to care about you, about your work, about anything beyond his protective walls, he'll fight it. He'll push you away, maybe even hurt you in the process. I can handle it, Sienna said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Can you? Julian's expression was worried now. Because from where I'm sitting, you're starting to care about him too. Not just his approval, not just the project, him. I can see it in how you talk about him, how your eyes change when you mention his name. Sienna pulled her hand back, defensive. That's ridiculous. I barely know him. You know him better than most people who've worked with him for years. Julian stood, dropping money on the table for their coffee. Just remember when Castellan Roth finally lets someone past his walls, when he finally allows himself to feel something real. It won't be gentle. It'll be a storm. Everything he's repressed for 7 years coming out at once. He picked up his camera. And you, Sienna Vale, are the lightning that's about to strike. With that cryptic warning, Julian left, leaving Sienna alone, with her coffee and a creeping sense that she'd gotten herself into something far more complicated than a professional competition. Because Julian was right, she was starting to care, not just about winning the project, about the man behind the monster, the brother Julian had lost. The person he had been before tragedy had forced him to become someone else, and that was dangerous, because caring about him meant risking something more precious than her career. It meant risking her heart. Sienna arrived early, but the moment she stepped into her workspace, she knew something was wrong. Her sketches were no longer in the neat stack she'd left them in. They were spread across her desk. Someone invaded, and in the center of her desk, there was a single piece of paper, handwritten. Sienna's hands trembled slightly as she picked it up. He destroys everyone he touches. You think you're different, but you're not. Your brilliant ideas won't save you. Your passion won't protect you. He will use you, drain everything creative and beautiful from your soul. and then discard you like all the others. Leave now, while you still remember who you were before him. This is not a threat. This is mercy. Someone who learned too late. Sienna read it 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each pass. Someone had been in her workspace, had left this. Warning, threat, prophecy? She looked around the empty floor. The cleaning crew had access, but why would they leave a note like this? Unless, admiring your secret admirer's work. Sienna spun around so fast she knocked her portfolio off the desk. Marcus Chen stood in the entrance to her workspace, 2 cups of coffee in his hands, his usual playful expression replaced by something more serious. How long have you been standing there? Sienna demanded, her voice sharper than she intended. Long enough to see that someone's been playing mind games. Marcus walked in, setting 1 coffee cup on her desk. He glanced at the note, his eyes scanning it quickly. Though I have to admit, Marcus continued, whoever wrote it isn't entirely wrong. Castellan Roth does have a history of destroying the people who work closest to him, just usually through professional decimation, not whatever this serial killer energy is. You know something, Sienna said, studying his face, about who might have written this. Marcus hesitated, a rare moment of uncertainty crossing his usually confident features. Maybe, but if I tell you, you have to promise not to do anything stupid, like confront them, or tell Roth, because that would make everything worse. Tell me. Marcus sighed, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward her. It was a news article from 3 years ago. The headline read, Promising Architect Isabel Lauren Leaves Roth Enterprises Amid Controversy. The photograph showed a striking woman in her early 30s with dark hair and haunted eyes that looked eerily familiar. Isabel Laurent, Marcus said quietly. She was the last. Architect Castellan Roth worked with this closely, brilliant, maybe even more talented than you, if I'm being honest. He brought her in for a major project 5 years ago. They worked together for 18 months. Intense collaboration, daily meetings, the kind of professional relationship that looked, from the outside, like it might become something more. Sienna's stomach twisted. What happened? No one knows exactly, but the project was never completed. Isabel left suddenly, refused to speak about it publicly, and 3 months later, she stopped practicing architecture entirely. Now she works as a graphic designer in Portland. The rumors say Castellan pushed her too hard, demanded perfection beyond what was humanly possible, rejected design after design until she had a breakdown. But there are other rumors too, darker ones. Like what? Like she fell in love with him, like he knew it and used it to manipulate her, told her she was weak for letting personal feelings interfere with work. And the handwriting on that note. I've seen Isabel's signature on old project documents. It matches. Sienna knew she should wait, should think it through, should be strategic. But fury was burning through her veins like wildfire. Someone had invaded her workspace, had tried to manipulate her with fear. And whether it was Isabel Laurent or someone else, whether the warning was genuine or malicious, Castellan Roth needed to know. Or maybe she just needed to see his face when she asked him about it. She stormed toward his office, the note clutched in her hand like evidence at a trial. Vivian looked up from her desk, alarm flashing across her usually composed features. Miss Vale, you can't just. But Sienna was already pushing through the door to Castellan's office. He was on the phone, standing by his windows, his back to the door. His voice was cold, cutting through whatever poor soul was on the other end. I don't accept excuses. I accept results. You have 48 hours to correct this failure, or I'll find someone who can. Are we clear? Good. He ended the call and turned around. When he saw Sienna standing there, uninvited, fury in her eyes and a crumpled note in her hand, something flickered across his expression. Surprise, and then concern? Sienna, I don't recall scheduling a meeting for. Someone broke into my workspace last night, Sienna interrupted, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. They went through my designs, my notes, my personal research, and they left this. She threw the note on his desk. Castellan picked it up, his jaw tightening as he read. The silence that followed was absolute and terrifying. Who wrote this? His voice was dangerously quiet. You tell me, Sienna shot back. Marcus seems to think it's from Isabel Laurent, the architect you apparently destroyed 3 years ago. The one who left this company broken and never designed another building. Something in Castellan's expression shifted. The cold mask cracked, revealing something raw and complicated underneath. Marcus needs to learn when to keep his mouth shut, Castellan said tightly. So it's true? Sienna's voice rose. You did destroy her. You pushed her until she broke? And now she's so terrified of what you'll do to me that she's sneaking into buildings to warn me off? It's not that simple. Then make it simple, Sienna said. Yes, I did all, when she told me she loved me. Why? She whispered. He laughed, but it was a broken sound. Because 7 years ago, my father died because an architect prioritized beauty over safety, because passion over precision, because I trusted someone's vision, and 17 people paid the price. He turned back to her, and his eyes were haunted. I swore I would never let emotion compromise a project again. Never let someone's talent blind me to their limitations. So you became a monster, Sienna said. I became careful, Castellan corrected. And Isabel Laurent, he continued, was exceptional, brilliant, everything I thought I wanted in an architect. But she fell in love with the process, with the work, He stopped. I should have handled it better, he said. I should have been kinder, but kindness felt like weakness, and weakness killed my father. She's right. You know, she said quietly, I should take this warning and run, because working with you, getting close to you, letting you matter to me professionally or personally, it's dangerous. His jaw tightened. Then leave. I can't. The words escaped before Sienna could stop them. Why not? He demanded, moving even closer, his presence overwhelming. Why risk it? Why stay when you know what I am, what I do to people? Sienna met his gaze, refusing to back down despite her racing heart. Because beneath the monster you've made yourself into, I see glimpses of someone who understands that architecture should mean something beyond profit margins. Someone who's spent 7 years punishing himself for a tragedy that wasn't his fault. And because I'm not Isabel Laurent, I won't break. I won't let you push me until I shatter. And I sure as hell won't fall in love with you, just because you're the first person who's ever challenged me as much as I challenge myself. Castellan stared at her, something cracking in his expression. His hand lifted, almost involuntarily, reaching toward her face. And then Vivian's voice cut through the moment. Mr. Roth, I apologize for the interruption, but you have an urgent call from the Seattle Construction Division. It's about the Morrison project. They're saying there's a structural concern that requires your immediate attention. The word structural hit him like a physical blow. She saw it the way his face went white, the way his hand dropped, the way 7 years of trauma came flooding back in an instant. Transfer it to my phone, he said, his voice suddenly distant, empty. He looked at Sienna one more time, and the walls were back up, the vulnerability gone. The monster returned. Get back to work, Miss Vale, and install a lock on your workspace. I'll have security review the overnight footage to see who accessed your area. Just like that, the moment was over. She'd just seen behind Roth's mask, and what she'd found there was more dangerous than any monster. She'd found a man worth saving. By noon, the entire 50th floor knew something had happened. Sienna had returned to her workspace to find that security had indeed installed a new lock. More than that, they'd installed a camera. Small, discreet, but unmistakably pointing at her desk. Castellan Roth didn't do anything halfway. She was trying to focus on her designs, trying to push the morning's confrontation out of her mind. When Thomas Whitmore appeared at her workspace entrance, "May I come in?" he asked, his weathered face gentle but serious. Of course. Thomas entered, closing the glass door behind him, something people rarely did unless they wanted privacy. He sat down in the chair opposite her desk, his movements careful and deliberate. I heard about the note, he said without preamble. Marcus told me, and I think you should know the whole story about Isabel Laurent, not the rumors, the truth. Sienna set down her stylus. You knew her. I mentored her early in her career. Thomas's eyes were sad. Brilliant young woman, passionate, idealistic, everything you are actually, which is why I'm worried. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Isabel didn't just love Castellan Roth, she became obsessed with earning his approval. Every design she created was an attempt to please him. Every choice was filtered through what would Castellan want. And slowly, piece by piece, she lost herself. Thomas paused, his expression pained. The day she finally presented her completed design after 18 months of work, hundreds of revisions, countless sleepless nights, Castellan reviewed it for exactly 12 minutes. Then he told her it lacked soul, that she'd focused so much on meeting his standards that she'd forgotten to include her own voice. Sienna felt her breath catch. He rejected it completely. And when Isabel broke down, when she told him she'd sacrificed everything for his approval, that she'd fallen in love with him in the process, he told her that her emotional investment had compromised her objectivity, that she'd proven his point about passion being a liability. Thomas stood, moving to her window, looking out at the city. But here's what most people don't know, he continued. 3 months after Isabel left, Castellan implemented 90% of her design ideas in a different project. He'd called her work soulless, but he'd still recognized its brilliance. He just couldn't admit it to her, couldn't give her the validation she needed. Why are you telling me this? Sienna asked. Thomas turned, his eyes holding a lifetime of wisdom. Because you're making the same mistake she did, not falling in love with him, though that might be happening too, but starting to design for his approval instead of your own vision. I've watched you these past few days. You second guess yourself. You wonder, will this impress Castellan? Instead of, is this the right choice? She felt tears prick her eyes. What if who I am isn't enough? Then he doesn't deserve you, Thomas said simply. Professionally or personally? A knock interrupted them. Marcus stood outside the glass door. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but we have a problem. A big one. He pulled out his tablet. It was an architectural forum, one of the major industry websites where professionals discuss projects and trends. And the top thread, with over 300 comments in the last hour, is Castellan Roth's secret competition. Is he exploiting young architects for free ideas? Someone leaked it, Marcus said grimly. They posted details about all 5 of us, our backgrounds, the 30-day timeline, the fact that only one person gets chosen and the others get nothing but portfolio pieces. The industry is going ballistic. They're calling it exploitation, spec work, unethical. Sienna scrolled through the comments, her stomach sinking with each one. This is exactly what's wrong with the industry. Powerful men using young talent as unpaid consultants. Roth is collecting ideas. He'll take the best elements from all 5 designs and claim them as his own. This is a disaster, Sienna whispered. No, Thomas said quietly, his expression thoughtful. This is an opportunity. Both Sienna and Marcus turned to look at him. Think about it, Thomas continued. Right now, we're competing against each other. 3 architects because Damien and Elena are gone fighting for one position. But what if we didn't compete? What if we collaborated? Castellan would never accept a joint proposal, Marcus said immediately. Are you sure? Thomas smiled. Because the industry is watching now. And if 3 architects came together, combined their strengths, and created something none of them could have made alone, that's a powerful statement, not just about design, but about how architecture should work. Collaboration over competition, community over ego. Sienna's mind raced. It's risky. If he rejects it, we all lose. We're already risking everything, Marcus pointed out. At least this way, we control the narrative. Thomas nodded. Sienna has the vision, the underground garden, the historical preservation. Marcus has the technical brilliance to make it structurally sound. And I have 40 years of experience designing spaces that serve communities, not just corporations. He looked at both of them. Together, we could create something revolutionary, something that proves Castellan wrong about competition being the only path to excellence. Sienna felt something ignite in her chest, not just excitement, hope. We'd be betting everything on him being open to change, she said slowly, on him valuing the design more than his need for control. Yes, Thomas agreed. We'd be betting on the man he could be, not the monster he's become. I'm in, if nothing else. It'll be the most spectacular failure in architectural history, Marcus added. They both looked at Sienna. She thought about Isabel's note, about Castellan's confession, about the glimpse she'd seen of the man beneath the ruthless exterior. Let's do it, she said. Let's show him that collaboration can be stronger than competition, that trust can build something fear never could. The three of them stood there in Sienna's workspace, three architects from completely different backgrounds and philosophies, about to attempt something that had never been done before, challenge Castellan Roth not just professionally, but philosophically, and either change him in the process, or be destroyed trying. 10 p.m., the 50th floor should have been empty. Instead, Sienna's workspace had become mission control. Three architects, three completely different approaches, one impossible deadline. They'd been working for 8 hours straight, fueled by coffee, takeout Thai food, and the kind of creative energy that only comes when brilliant minds collide. The structural load here, Marcus said, pointing to his calculations spread across Sienna's desk, needs to account for both the existing underground space and the new building above. We're talking about significant retrofitting, steel reinforcement, probably some carbon fiber strengthening of the original foundation, which increases cost, Thomas noted, but decreases environmental impact long term. We're not demolishing and rebuilding from scratch. We're preserving and enhancing. Exactly, Sienna added annotations to her sketches. And the public garden space, Thomas. This is where your community design expertise is crucial. This can't just be a tourist attraction. It needs to serve the neighborhood, become a genuine gathering space. Thomas smiled, pulling out his own drawings. What if we partnered with local schools, made the garden an educational space? Chicago history, jazz heritage, environmental science, urban horticulture. That's brilliant, Marcus said. And it gives us additional funding opportunities, educational grants, cultural preservation subsidies. They worked in comfortable synchronization, each person's strengths filling the gaps in the other's knowledge. Marcus would identify a structural challenge. Sienna would find a creative solution. Thomas would ensure it served human needs beyond pure functionality. It was magical, exactly what architecture should be. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Sure, Sienna replied. Why does this matter so much to you? Not just the competition, not just proving yourself to Roth, but the preservation, the history, the community impact. Sienna was quiet for a moment, surprised by the question and the genuine curiosity in Marcus's voice. My hometown in Montana, she finally said, was built around a copper mine. When I was 12, the mine closed. And within 5 years, everything else closed too. The businesses, the school, people moved away. Now it's almost a ghost town. I watched my entire community disappear because we'd built everything around one purpose, one function. When that function ended, there was nothing left to hold us together. No cultural memory, no shared spaces, no reason to stay. Her voice grew passionate. That's why this matters. Because buildings aren't just structures, they're anchors, they're memory, they're the physical manifestation of community. And when we erase history for the sake of progress, we lose something essential about who we are. Speaking of Isabel, Marcus said carefully, has anyone else noticed that we haven't received any more threatening notes? No additional warnings? Maybe she got what she wanted, Sienna suggested, scared me enough to warn me off. Or, Thomas said thoughtfully, maybe she's watching, waiting to see if you'll make different choices than she did. Before anyone could respond, the glass door to Sienna's workspace slid open. All three of them turned. Castellan Roth stood in the doorway. He was still in his suit, though his tie was loosened and his sleeves were rolled up the most casual Sienna had ever seen him, but it was his expression that caught her attention. He wasn't angry that they were working together. He looked surprised and something else, something that might have been longing. "It's late," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I saw the lights still on from my office." "We're collaborating," Marcus said boldly, before Sienna could craft a more diplomatic response. "Combining our approaches, creating something none of us could build alone." Castellan's jaw tightened. "I don't recall authorizing a joint proposal." "You didn't forbid it either," Sienna countered, standing. "You said collaboration was permitted. We're just taking you at your word." Their eyes met across the workspace, and the air crackled with tension. "Show me," Castellan said abruptly. "What?" "Show me what you're building. What's worth staying here until 10 p.m. on a Tuesday?" Sienna glanced at Thomas and Marcus. They both nodded. For the next hour, they walked Castellan through their collaborative vision. Sienna explained the historical preservation and underground garden restoration. Marcus detailed the structural innovations and engineering solutions. Thomas described the community integration and educational components. Castellan listened in absolute silence, his expression unreadable, his dark eyes moving from sketch to calculation to rendering. When they finished, the silence stretched painfully. Finally, Castellan spoke. "This is the most naive, impractical, expensive design I've seen in years." Her heart sank. "The permitting alone will take months. The historical preservation requirements will be nightmarish. The community partnership components will add layers of bureaucracy and oversight. That will slow everything down." He paused, his eyes finding Sienna's. "And it's exactly what this city needs." The three architects exchanged stunned glances. "You like it?" Marcus asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "I don't like anything," Castellan said, his tone dry. "But I recognize exceptional work when I see it. And this is architecture with purpose, with soul." He moved closer to the renderings, his fingers tracing the lines of Sienna's underground garden design. "My father used to say that buildings should tell stories, not just provide square footage." His voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. "I'd forgotten that. Or maybe I forced myself to forget." He looked up, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "You have 3 weeks to make this viable. I want full structural analysis, complete budget projections, permitting timeline, community partnership agreements, everything needed to prove this isn't just a beautiful dream, but a buildable reality." "Pause. And then?" Sienna asked. "Pause." Castellan's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Then I'll take it to the board, and I'll fight for it." "Because maybe," he paused, something raw flickering in his eyes, "maybe it's time I remembered what I became an architect for in the first place." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Miss Vale, a word privately." Marcus and Thomas tactfully gathered their things, giving Sienna encouraging looks as they left, and then she was alone with Castellan Roth again. The silence between them felt alive, dangerous. Castellan stood by the windows, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city like it held answers he desperately needed. "I called Isabel today," he said abruptly. "After security confirmed it was her who accessed your workspace." Sienna's breath caught. "What did she say?" "That she was trying to save you from making her mistakes, from falling in love with someone incapable of loving back, from sacrificing yourself at the altar of my impossible standards." He turned, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole Sienna's breath. "And she asked me a question I couldn't answer. She asked, 'Have you learned anything in 3 years, Castellan? Or are you going to destroy this one too?'" Sienna moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. "What did you tell her?" "I told her," Castellan's voice was barely above a whisper now. "I told her I don't know. Because I don't know how to be any other way. How to want something without analyzing it to death. How to feel something without fearing it will compromise everything I've built." He took a step toward her, and suddenly the space between them felt electric. "You terrify me, Sienna Vale." "Why?" "Because when you present your designs, I don't just see architecture. I see passion. I see someone who believes in something beyond profit and prestige. Someone who reminds me of who I used to be before fear made me into this. He gestured at himself with something like disgust. You're not a monster, Sienna said softly. Then what am I? She reached out, her hand hovering near his face, not quite touching. You're someone who's been hurt so badly that you've forgotten it's possible to heal. Someone who's convinced himself that isolation is strength, that fear is wisdom. Her hand finally made contact, fingertips brushing his jaw. But I see you, Castellan. I see the man who called my design brilliant with genuine wonder. I see the person who stayed late to review our work not because he wanted to criticize it, but because he wanted to understand it. I see someone who's tired of being alone. Castellan's hand came up, covering hers, pressing her palm fully against his face. His eyes closed briefly, and Sienna saw something break in his expression. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, his voice cracking. I don't know how to let someone matter to me without destroying them, or being destroyed. Then we'll figure it out together, Sienna whispered. We'll make mistakes. We'll hurt each other. But maybe we'll also build something neither of us could create alone. Castellan opened his eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made Sienna's knees weak. If I kiss you right now, he said, his voice rough with emotion, everything changes. This stops being professional. This becomes real, Sienna finished. Dangerous. Worth it. For a long moment, they stood there, suspended between what was safe and what was true. And then Castellan closed the distance. His kiss wasn't gentle. It was 7 years of repressed emotion, desperate loneliness, and the terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, he could feel something again without the world crumbling around him. Sienna kissed him back with equal intensity, her hand sliding into his hair, pulling him closer, showing him without words that she wasn't fragile, that she wouldn't shatter under the weight of his complexity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Castellan rested his forehead against hers. This is insane, he whispered. Completely, Sienna agreed. It will complicate everything. Probably. I might still destroy you. Sienna pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Or I might save you. Castellan laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. Arrogant, he said. You taught me well. He kissed her again, softer this time, like he was memorizing the feeling, learning how to be gentle again. 3 weeks, he said against her lips. Make your design perfect. Prove to my board that vision and viability can coexist. And then we'll see if I'm capable of building something that doesn't end in ruins. He stepped back, professional distance returning like armor, but his eyes were different now, alive, hopeful, terrified. Good night, Sienna. Good night, Castellan. He left, and Sienna stood alone in her workspace, her lips still tingling, her heart racing, her entire world fundamentally altered. She'd come to Chicago to prove she was a great architect. She hadn't expected to fall in love with the most complicated, brilliant, damaged man she'd ever met. And she definitely hadn't expected him to kiss her like she was the answer to questions he'd been too afraid to ask. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered like a promise. Inside, Sienna whispered to the empty room, 3 weeks, we can do this. But even as she said it, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning that sounded suspiciously like Isabel Laurent. He destroys everyone he touches. Will you be any different? Day 28, 2 days before the final presentation to Roth Enterprises' board of directors. 2 days before everything Sienna had worked for would either become reality or crumble into nothing. The 50th floor conference room was packed. Castellan sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as always in professional settings, but Sienna had learned to read the subtle signs the way his fingers strummed once, twice against the mahogany when he was intrigued, the slight narrowing of his eyes when something impressed him. Around the table sat the people who would determine their fate: financial analysts, structural engineers, environmental consultants, the city's chief architect liaison, a representative from the Chicago Historical Society, and Julian Roth, sitting in the corner with his camera, documenting everything, with that knowing smile that suggested he saw more than anyone else. Sienna stood at the presentation screen, Marcus and Thomas flanking her. 3 architects, one unified vision. The Riverside Legacy Project, Sienna began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, isn't just a commercial complex. It's a bridge between past and future, a statement that progress doesn't require erasure, that we can build something new while honoring what came before. She clicked to the first rendering, a stunning glass and steel structure, rising above the Chicago River, modern and elegant, but at ground level, visible through massive glass panels, was something extraordinary. The restored underground garden, Delphine Moreau's Impossible Eden, brought back to life with modern technology and careful historical preservation. The building itself, Marcus took over seamlessly, represents cutting-edge sustainable architecture, LEED Platinum certified, solar panels integrated into the facade, rainwater collection and gray water recycling, carbon-neutral operations within 5 years. He pulled up structural diagrams that looked like works of art in themselves. But the real innovation is how we've integrated the existing underground structure. Instead of demolishing and rebuilding, we've reinforced and enhanced. The original 1,950 seconds foundation becomes part of our support system. We're literally building on history, not erasing it. Thomas stepped forward for his portion, his gentle voice carrying the weight of 40 years of experience. The community impact extends far beyond commercial revenue. We've partnered with Chicago public schools to make the underground garden an educational resource. Science classes studying urban horticulture, history classes learning about Jazz-age Chicago, art students sketching in a space that inspired creativity 70 years ago. He clicked to images of the proposed public spaces. We've also created partnerships with local businesses. The ground floor, commercial spaces will be reserved for Chicago-based companies at reduced rates, supporting local economy, creating jobs within the community. Sienna returned to center stage for the conclusion. The projected construction timeline is 18 months. Budget, $58 million. Revenue projections show break even within 7 years, with significant profit margins after that. But the real return on investment isn't just financial. She looked directly at Castellan, letting him see the passion in her. The room fell silent. The financial analyst, a severe-looking woman named Dr. Patricia Chen, spoke first. The numbers are surprisingly sound. I expected this to be a money pit, given the historical preservation components, but you've offset costs cleverly. The educational partnerships provide tax incentives. The sustainability features reduce long-term operational costs. The local business initiative qualifies for municipal grants. She looked at him, something like respect in her expression. From a purely financial perspective, this is viable. Risky but viable. The structural engineer, a gruff man named Vincent Kowalski, nodded slowly. I've reviewed Chen's calculations 3 times. The integration of existing and new structure is, well, it's brilliant, frankly. I've never seen anything quite like it. The engineering challenges are significant, but solvable. One by one, the experts gave their assessments, each more positive than the last. But it was the woman from the Chicago Historical Society who brought tears to Sienna's eyes. I've been advocating for the preservation of the Sapphire Room site for 15 years, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Everyone told me it was impossible, that the structure was too degraded, that no developer would ever prioritize history over profit. She stood, moving to look at the renderings more closely. This doesn't just preserve history, it celebrates it, brings it into dialogue with the present, creates a space where people can experience what was lost and imagine what's possible. She felt Marcus squeeze her hand briefly, felt Thomas's proud smile warming her from the side, and when she looked at him, she saw something that made her heart stop. Pride, genuine, undisguised pride. He stood, commanding immediate attention from everyone in the room. I'll present this to the full board on Friday, he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. I'll recommend immediate approval and funding. This is exactly the kind of project Roth Enterprises should be building. He paused, his eyes finding Sienna's. Excellent work, all of you. The room erupted in congratulations, handshakes, excited discussions about next steps. Sienna felt like she was floating. They'd done it, against all odds. They'd created something that even Castellan Roth's impossible standards couldn't reject. But as the crowd dispersed, as people filed out discussing construction timelines and permit applications, Julian caught her eye. His expression wasn't celebratory, it was worried. He tilted his head toward the hallway, a silent request for her to follow. Julian led her to an empty office 3 floors down, closing the door with a finality that made Sienna's anxiety spike. What's wrong? She demanded immediately. Julian ran his hands through his hair, his usual casual confidence completely gone. He looked scared. I need you to promise me you won't react, that you'll hear everything before you do anything. Julian, you're terrifying me. Good, because you should be terrified. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to something, his hands shaking slightly. 3 days ago, I was having coffee with a friend who works at the Tribune. He's an investigative journalist covering real estate and development. He paused, his green eyes meeting hers with genuine anguish. He's been working on a story about Roth Enterprises, about Castellan and Sienna. It's going to destroy everything. He turned his phone toward her. It was a draft article. The headline alone made Sienna's blood run cold. The Roth Empire built on lies. How Castellan Roth covered up his role in the Seattle tragedy. Sienna grabbed the phone, reading with mounting horror. The article claimed that the Seattle collapse, the tragedy that killed Castellan's father and 17 others, wasn't just the architect's fault. According to anonymous sources and leaked documents, Castellan had been involved in the project review process, had signed off on preliminary designs, had approved cost-cutting measures that weakened the structure, and when the building collapsed, he'd allegedly buried his involvement, destroyed documents, paid off witnesses, let the architect take full blame to protect his own reputation and the family company. Sienna couldn't even finish the sentence. This can't be true. Castellan was devastated by that collapse. It changed him completely. He wouldn't have. I don't know if it's true, Julian interrupted, his voice raw. That's the problem. The documents look real. The sources are credible. But I know my brother. I know the guilt he carries. And this doesn't align with the person I know. He took the phone back, scrolling to another section. But here's where it gets worse. The article claims that Castellan started this architectural competition, your competition, as a way to steal innovative ideas without having to credit the creators, that he's done this before, that Isabel Lawrence's design ideas were implemented in his projects without her knowledge or compensation. Sienna felt like the floor was tilting beneath her. When does this publish? She asked, her voice hollow. That's the thing. It doesn't, not yet. Julian's expression was conflicted. My friend showed it to me as a courtesy. Because he knows I'm Castellan's brother. He's giving us 72 hours to respond before it goes live. Why are you telling me this instead of Castellan? Julian looked at her like she'd broken his heart. Because you're the only person he might actually listen to. The only person who's gotten close enough to see past his walls. And because, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I need to know if you believe him capable of this. If the man you've fallen in love with could be this person I'm not in love with. Don't lie to me, Sienna. I've seen the way you look at each other. The way he's changed these past few weeks. He smiles now. Did you know that? For the first time in 7 years, my brother smiles. Julian's voice cracked. But if this story is true, if even part of it is true, it doesn't just destroy his reputation, it destroys him and everyone connected to him, including your project, including your career, including whatever this thing is between you two. Sienna's mind raced. The Riverside Legacy Project. The board presentation in today's. The kiss that had changed everything. The way Castellan had looked at her during the presentation, like she'd given him something he'd thought he'd lost forever. I need to see him, she said. I need to hear his side. He's meeting with the board preparation team for the next 2 hours. After that, he has a conference call with the Seattle Development Office. Julian's expression was grim. Which means you have about 4 hours before the universe implodes. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip urgent. Sienna, if you confront him about this, if you make him face these accusations before he's ready, he'll shut down. He'll become the ruthless bastard everyone thinks he is. But if you don't confront him, if this story breaks and you're blindsided. Either way, I lose, Sienna whispered. Either way, we all lose. Julian released her, stepping back. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought bringing you two together might help him heal. I didn't anticipate this. He moved toward the door, then turned back one more time. For what it's worth, I don't believe the allegations. I think someone's trying to destroy him. The timing is too convenient. Right before your board presentation. Right when he's finally opening up to someone who would want to destroy him. Julian's laugh was bitter. Take your pick. He's made enemies of every competitor he's ever outsmarted, every architect he's ever rejected, every business deal he's won through sheer ruthlessness. He paused at the doorway. Or maybe it's someone closer than that. And then he was gone, leaving Sienna alone with information that could destroy everything. Sienna returned to her workspace in a daze. Marcus and Thomas were still celebrating, talking excitedly about construction timelines and material suppliers. They looked so happy, so hopeful. They had no idea their entire project was about to be incinerated by a scandal. Sienna, Marcus called out. We're going to get dinner to celebrate. You coming? She forced a smile. I have some final details to review for Friday. You guys go ahead. Thomas studied her with those wise old eyes. You look troubled. Did something happen? Just pre-presentation jitters, Sienna lied. I'll be fine. They left reluctantly, and Sienna was alone with her thoughts and the weight of Julian's revelation. She pulled up the article on her laptop, reading it again, slowly, carefully. The accusations were detailed, specific. They included dates, document reference numbers, testimonies from construction workers who'd been on site in Seattle. But they also felt calculated, like someone had taken real information and twisted it just enough to create a narrative of guilt. Sienna had spent enough time with Castellan to know his tells. She'd seen his genuine anguish when discussing his father's death, the raw vulnerability in his eyes when he'd admitted he didn't know how to let people in without destroying them. That wasn't the behavior of someone covering up their own culpability. That was the behavior of someone crushed by guilt they didn't deserve. But what if she was wrong? What if love or whatever this was had blinded her to the truth? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You've seen the article by now. I assume Julian showed you. Here's what you need to know. It's all true. Castellan Roth is a monster who uses people and discards them. Leave now. Take your brilliant design and walk away. Or stay and watch him destroy everything you've built, just like he destroyed me. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. Time is running out. Isabel. Sienna's hands trembled as she typed a response. If you have proof, show it to me. Face to face, tomorrow. I need to understand what really happened. The response came immediately. Starbucks on Michigan Avenue. Come alone. And Sienna, I'm trying to save you. Don't confuse that with weakness. Sienna set down her phone and stared at her reflection in the dark window. The city glittered behind her like a million broken promises. In 48 hours, she would present the Riverside Legacy Project to the board. It could be the defining achievement of her career, the thing she'd worked her entire life toward. But if this scandal broke, the project would be dead on arrival. No board would approve a $60 million development, led by someone accused of covering up criminal negligence. She could walk away now, take her designs, approach a different developer, Save her career, or she could stay, fight for Castellan, believe in him despite the evidence, and risk losing everything if she was wrong. The glass door to her workspace slid open. Sienna turned, expecting Marcus or Thomas. Instead, Castellan Roth stood there, still in his suit from the presentation, his tie now completely gone, the top buttons of his shirt undone. He looked exhausted, but also lighter somehow, like the successful presentation had lifted some invisible weight. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he said without preamble, stepping inside and closing the door. "About what happens after Friday, about what this is between us." He moved closer, and Sienna could see the conflict in his eyes, the fear battling with hope. "I don't know how to do relationships, Sienna. I'm terrible at vulnerability. I'll probably push you away 100 times before I learn to let you in, but..." He took her hands, his touch gentle despite his obvious nervousness. "I want to try. For the first time in 7 years, I want to try to be someone other than the monster everyone thinks I am." Sienna felt tears burning behind her eyes. This moment, this beautiful, terrifying moment of vulnerability was about to be shattered. She had to tell him, had to warn him about the article, about Isabel, about the scandal that was coming for him. But the words caught in her throat, because if she told him now, he would retreat, would become the ruthless, closed-off Castellan Roth who trusted no one, would assume she was just like everyone else, using him, manipulating him, waiting to betray him. "Castellan, He kissed her before she could finish, soft and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say with words. And Sienna kissed him back, memorizing the feeling, because she had a terrible suspicion this might be the last time. When they broke apart, Castellan rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever you were about to say looked serious," he murmured. "But can it wait until after Friday? Until after we've secured the project? I just want to enjoy this moment, this feeling of something good actually happening. Is that okay?" And Sienna, God help her, made a choice. "Yes," she whispered. "It can wait." She was lying, and they both knew it. But for one more night, they pretended everything was fine. For one more night, they lived in the beautiful fiction that love could conquer truth. And tomorrow Sienna would meet Isabel Laurent and discover the truth. That would change everything. 7 a.m., Starbucks on Michigan Avenue. Sienna had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Castellan's vulnerable expression, heard his voice saying he wanted to try, felt the weight of the lie she'd told by omission. She lied to protect him, or maybe she lied to protect herself, to preserve one more day of happiness before reality destroyed it all. Isabel Laurent was already there when Sienna arrived. She looked different from her photograph, older, thinner. Her dark hair was cut short now, and there were circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and haunted memories. But her eyes were the same, intense, intelligent, and filled with a kind of desperate urgency that made Sienna's stomach twist. "Thank you for coming," Isabel said as Sienna sat down. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying recently. "I wasn't sure you would. You broke into my workspace, left threatening notes, accused the man Sienna stopped herself, accused my employer of terrible things. Of course I'm here. I need to know the truth." Isabel laughed bitterly. "The man you love. You can say it. I'm not fragile anymore." She pulled a folder from her bag, sliding it across the table. "This is everything. Documents from the Seattle project. Emails between Castellan and the architect who took the fall. Financial records showing payment transfers that happened after the collapse. Witness statements that were mysteriously withdrawn." Sienna opened the folder with trembling hands. The first document was an email chain from 6 months before the Seattle collapse. Castellan's name was on several messages, discussing structural modifications to reduce costs, approving changes to the foundation design, authorizing the use of cheaper materials. "These could be faked," Sienna said, but her voice lacked conviction. "They're not. I had them verified by a forensic document analyst. Those are real emails from Castellan's account. Isabel's hands shook as she pulled out another set of papers. And this is the smoking gun. It was a financial transfer. $1 million, paid from a Roth Enterprises subsidiary account to the architect of record, the man everyone blamed for the collapse. Dated 2 weeks after the tragedy. Hush money, Isabel said flatly. Payment to take the blame, to protect the Roth family name. Sienna felt like she couldn't breathe. But why? She asked. Why would Castellan cover this up? Why carry all that guilt if he knew he was responsible? Because, Isabel said, leaning forward, her eyes fierce. Guilt is easier than accountability. Punishing himself internally is easier than facing public consequences. He gets to be the tragic figure, the man broken by loss, instead of the one who caused it. She pulled out one more document, a psychological evaluation dated 3 years ago. After I left Roth Enterprises, I had a breakdown, complete psychological collapse. I was diagnosed with something called narcissistic abuse syndrome. Sienna shook her head, unable to speak. It's what happens when someone systematically manipulates you, makes you question your own judgment, and then withdraws that approval to control you. He didn't just reject my designs, he rejected me. Made me feel like I was nothing without his validation. And when I finally broke down and confessed my feelings, he told me I was too weak to be a real architect. She grabbed Sienna's hand across the table, her grip desperate. You're brilliant. Your underground garden design is everything I wish I'd had the courage to create. But he's going to do the same thing, just like he did to me. Sienna pulled her hand back, her mind racing. If this is all true, she said slowly, why not go public years ago? Why wait until now? Something shifted in Isabel's expression. Because I was too broken, too afraid. But when I heard about his new competition, about 5 more architects being put through the same hell, I experienced, she straightened, some of the old fire returning to her eyes. I couldn't let it happen again to someone as talented as you. Sienna stared at the documents spread across the table. The evidence. Something felt wrong. Who gave you these documents? Sienna asked suddenly. Isabel blinked. What? These emails, these financial records, this evidence. You left Roth Enterprises 3 years ago. You've been working as a graphic designer in Portland. How did you suddenly get access to internal company documents and confidential financial transfers? Isabel's expression flickered, just for a second, but Sienna saw it. Fear. I had help, Isabel admitted. Someone who wants the truth to come out as much as I do. Who? I can't tell you that. They'd lose their job, their career. Sienna stood abruptly, gathering the documents. I'm taking these. I'm going to verify them independently. And then I'm going to confront him directly. Give him a chance to explain before this goes public. No, Isabel grabbed her arm. If you warn him, he'll bury the evidence. He'll destroy anyone who tries to expose him, including you. Sienna pulled free, her voice cold. If he's who you say he is, then I need to hear it from him, but I won't condemn him based on documents that conveniently appeared right before the biggest presentation of his career. That's not justice, Isabel. That's revenge. She walked toward the door, then turned back. I'm sorry for what happened to you, but I'm not you. Isabel's expression hardened. Then you're a fool, and you'll learn the same lesson I did, but it'll be too late. Sienna left the coffee. 24 hours to discover the truth. 24 hours to decide if she believed in him, or in the evidence against him. And the choice she made would destroy one of their lives. The only question was, whose? And just like that, trust becomes the most fragile structure of all. Sienna came to fight for her vision, but instead, she found herself standing at the center of a war she never saw coming. A buried garden, a billionaire with scars deeper than steel, and a lie powerful enough to destroy them both. Now the project hangs in the balance. Reputations are crumbling, and love may be the first casualty. But this is only the beginning, because in part 2, the real foundation will be tested and not everyone will survive the collapse.